Well, this is a beautiful yellow sapphire from Africa, and it has a story. A couple of years ago, I was on my annual expedition to the Tucson show, or actually the Tucson Gem Shows, as there are dozens of gem shows going on at the same time in Tucson every year. If you haven't been to the Tucson Gem Shows, you should visit them and bring comfortable walking shoes. Well, on this particular trip, I had signed up through the United States Fasteners Guild website to participate in one of the many events that they were hosting. On this event, what happens is one morning you meet up with Scott Schusser. He's a unique fastener in his own right. A lot of his cuts are copies of the most famous diamonds in history, and I made a video where I talk more about Scott. It's called The Moe Scale and Gem Hardness. So about 8 or so gem cutters signed up for Scott's tour. And we met at one of the show sites early in the morning. And he talks about gem cutting and where to find rough. And the whole purpose is that he takes you around to show you the various gem rough dealers that are at many of the shows, and which ones have specific rough that you may be looking for, or the best prices. So it's a great tour, by the way. If you can sign up for it, you do so. So there were about 8 of us on the tour this day, and this involves a lot of walking to a lot of the different shows and lunch. And so, I got to know some of the other people on the tour. Well, one of the guys, John, who owns Star Mountain, turns out that he's a gem rough dealer, importer, at one of the shows. So John was just taking a break from his operation. He was curious about this tour, so he participated. So after getting to know John, I went later and visited John's store, I guess, at the show where he was selling. Well, John lived part of the time in Kenya and part of the year in the U.S. He brings in a lot of unique rough, and I picked up 5 beautiful pieces of rare Molly Garnet from John, which I cut in a previous video, and this one big yellow sapphire. So thanks, John. Okay, for our yellow sapphire, we're going to cut into a trillion design. We want the 96 index cutting the bottom of the triangle trillion. Our trillion design, the length is slightly longer than the width on our diagram, so we put the longer this way, and we put the 96 index so that it gets cut right there. So we line it up, and that's how we're going to align our stone to cut our trillion. The yellow sapphire is coming along nicely. I've finished with the 3000 grit diamond on a bat lap, and I'll just work this pavilion through with bat laps all the way through with the 8000 grit, the 14,000 grit, and the 50,000 grit to put a final polish on it. The stone does have inclusions, and I knew that, so for this one I decided not to worry about the inclusions. I didn't want to end up with a very small stone in this case, So it's going to have some inclusion, you can see, but it's coming along nicely, and we'll keep working on the pre-polish. I finished polishing the pavilion, or bottom half of our Yellow Sapphire. And now I'll transfer it and cut the top half of our Yellow Sapphire. Now when I transfer my stone, again, I'm working on a trillion. There are dops that are cone-shaped, round. There's V-shaped, and there's flat ones. And then specialty ones, there's kind of long, rectangular shaped ones for the long emerald-shaped tourmalines. So it doesn't fit perfectly, a trillion, in my experience, into a cone shape. So I'm going to use epoxy and a lot of it to keep it on, and I don't want the culet damaged, so what I do is I get a little piece of putty and put it at the very bottom of my dop. It's out of the way, very bottom, and all that's going to do is the epoxy that goes into the cone, because I'm going to fill it with epoxy, won't be holding the very tip of my trillion, because I don't want that to chip. So then I just set my epoxy the normal way. And currently using JB Weld two-part epoxy. It's readily available at Home Depot, and I haven't had any problems with it. Okay, again, to use the epoxy, the two-part epoxy, you want a 50-50 mix, so I use a business card and I pour and eyeball it until there's about the same size puddle of epoxy. So that's close enough for 50-50. Then once you start mixing it, you have about a couple minutes to get it in your dop, and I plan to just fill the bottom dop with the two-part epoxy and then push the top dop into the epoxy. And I just use a bamboo skewer that I got at the grocery store. Okay, so again, I just push the top onto the bottom, tighten the top up. I've already tightened the bottom, and then move the transfer jig around until the epoxy starts to set up. You don't want the epoxy going down the side of the stone, and you don't want it going too far down the dop. So you just watch it until it sets up a little bit. And then I'll work on another project, and tomorrow I'll be able to come back to our Yellow Sapphire and work on the upper part of the stone. Okay, I've finished polishing our Yellow Sapphire with a trillion cut. Next will be to put it in, soak it in acetone and remove the adhesive. Now, because this is sapphire, and because I was reading some notes that John Gearloose Rolf had posted on a site about the bat lap, sometimes he said with sapphire, run it faster than you normally would. So when I got to the 8,000 grit diamond on a bat lap, I increased my speed. I normally run on the Ultratech around 600. Sometimes I slow it down to 500. The machine goes up to 1,600. So there's plenty of power with the Ultratech, but generally I'm running around 600 RPMs. So I increased it to 700 and then 800 when I got to the 14,000 diamond on a bat lap, just to see what would happen. And seems to, certainly nothing bad happened, so I'm thinking John's right. It may be better at a faster speed. What he was talking about was when you run a slower speed, sometimes there's a tendency to press harder, and you really need the light touch. It's better to go higher speed light touch than slower speed, and then subconsciously put more pressure on the stone. So let's see what this looks like after we take it out of the acetone. Happy faceting, everyone.